A very good morning to all students and welcome to my class Edufly JEE-NEET. So like in previous class we have discussed about the bryophytes and now today we are going to discuss about pteridophytes. This is a very important topic of plant kingdom. See, सबसे important point is that they are known as the reptiles of plant kingdom. Like bryophytes को क्या कहे जाते थे? Amphibians of plant kingdom. और इसको क्या कहते हैं? Reptiles of plant kingdom. ठीक है? So let's see some beautiful characteristics of this kingdom. I mean this phylum, plant kingdom के pteridophytes. Fine. So what is habitat? Habitat means land, humid and shady area where they are found basically. कहाँ वो रहते हैं basically जो pteridophytes हैं? Land, humid and shady area. And they are also called as vascular cryptograms. Vascular cryptograms मतलब कि उनमें vascular tissues present हैं और vascular tissues कौन क्या होते हैं? Xylem and phloem. Xylem and phloem are present in case of pteridophytes, but in case of bryophytes it was absent. Fine. तो vascular tissue क्या क्या होते हैं? Xylem and phloem. तो what's the main function of xylem tissue? What xylem do is transports water from soil to leaf and different parts of or store the food. And basically xylem helps in the mechanical support of the plant. So the plant stays rigid. And in case of phloem, it transports food from leaves to different parts of the plant. So these are the two very important like vascular tissues that are present in case of pteridophytes. And these are the components of xylem that helps the plants in case of mechanical support and storage. Vessels, tracheids, xylem parenchyma, xylem fiber. Fine. And in case of phloem, there are four: companion cells, sieve tubes, parenchyma and phloem fibers. But in case of vessel and companion cells, vessel is absent in case of xylem and in case of phloem, companion cells are absent. So these are basic characteristics. We'll get to know more about xylem and phloem. About some important characteristics of these pteridophytes, like we have discussed some points. See, xylem of Pteridium, Salagina and Massilia, they form pseudovessels. See, I have told you that in xylem, in case of pteridophytes, vessels are absent, but some plant species are there, they have false vessels. And how they are formed? They are formed by the modification of tracheids. Fine. Tracheids. How they are formed? Pseudovessels are formed by the modification of tracheids. Fine. See, in vascular tissues, they are called vascular bundles actually. So they are of these three types. So I am saying you what is concentric. First is concentric, second is amphibrical, and the third is closed. Fine. So what is concentric? Concentric is what? Is when xylem is surrounded by the phloem tissue. This the inner one is xylem. I have shown you in diagrammatic form. See, this the inside is the xylem. So if the phloem is surrounded by xylem, the inside one is xylem and outside is the phloem. So when xylem is surrounded by the phloem, that is concentric. And about amphibrical, it's when phloem is surrounded by xylem, it's called amphibrical. And now see the important one is closed. See, why it is closed? Xylem by phloem, what does it mean? I'll explain you. See, what is cambium actually? Cambium is nothing but, this is xylem phloem, a partially dividing layer that helps in the modification of stems and roots, that is secondary growth occurs because only of cambium, but that is absent. So cambium is absent in case of pteridophytes, and that's the reason that secondary growth is absent in case of pteridophytes. Now see, what happens in secondary growth is that like after first season of any plant, the thickness of stem and root, it increases. So that's the thing, the secondary growth doesn't happen in case of pteridophytes. So closed means partially, that is dividing layer that separates xylem and phloem, that is nothing but cambium. That is nothing but cambium. Fine. So just remember these few important points, and from NEET point of view, remember this, that Pteridium, Salaginella and Massilia, these three plant species have pseudovessels, that is the modification of tracheids takes place. So it's called false vessels. It is called false vessels. Fine. So these are called false vessels. And see, these are the important things you should know about the vascular tissue. These important points you should notice and you should study, because this is the basics of the pteridophytes. See, and there is always an exception for any case. See, like we told you, secondary growth is absent in case of pteridophytes, but there is always an exception, isoids. This is a plant in which the secondary growth is present. So you remember this from NEET point of view, because exception, if there is an exception, question always comes. It's isoids, ISOETES. Fine. See, pteridophytes are called the first successful terrestrial plants. Why? Because they have adapted their terrestrial plants as compared to bryophytes. They are more adapted. ठीक है, क्योंकि इसमें जाइलम होते हैं, फ्लोएम होते हैं ना, तो इसी के वजह से जो क्या होता है कि वो बहुत ज़्यादा अडेप्ट हो सकते हैं टेरेस्ट्रियल प्लांट्स, टेरेस्ट्रियल प्लेसेस में. ठीक है, और जो प्लांट बॉडी है वो क्योंकि डिफ्रेंशिएट हो सकते हैं रूट, स्टेम्स एंड लीव्स में. फाइन. नेक्स्ट इज देखिए, टेरिडोफाइट्स आर टू टाइप्स होते हैं बेस्ड ऑन देयर स्टेम एंड लीफ साइजेस. देखो, पहला अगर स्टेम स्मॉलर होता है, इफ द स्टेम इज स्मॉलर एंड द लीव्स आर लार्जर, ध्यान दीजिएगा, स्टेम छोटा होगा, लीव्स बड़ा होगा, उसको क्या कहेंगे? मैक्रोफाइलस टेरिडोफाइट्स. एग्जाम्पल रिमेंबर फ्रॉम नीट पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, टेरिडियम टेरिस एंड मार्सिलिया. टेरिडियम टेरिस एंड मार्सिलिया. फाइन. एंड स्टेम इज लार्जर. If the stem is larger and the leaves are smaller, that is called micro. देखिए, इसको just relate and study, just compare and study. See, stem is smaller, leaves are larger, that is macrophylous pteridophytes. An example is Pteridium, Pteris and Marsilia. And stem is larger and leaves are smaller, that is microphylous. An example is Equisetum, Lycopodium. Fine. So examples you remember, because these are the terminology which you have to remember in case of pteridophytes, because example question always comes from example. So you always remember the example from NEET point of view. You just write the terminology again and again, you will get to remember. Fine. So let's see some more important characteristics of pteridophytes, their life cycle, the classes of pteridophytes. See about the life cycle in case of pteridophytes. The plant body in case of pteridophytes is sporophyte. That is, sporophyte is diploid. Fine. It's opposite in case of bryophytes. Like I have explained in bryophytes, just see my notes and revise it once. Next is Homosporous pteridophytes. Homosporous means only one type of spore is present in case of Homosporous. Basically, I have to say one thing, that in case of pteridophytes, the life cycle, basically it happens through the formation of spores. फॉर स्पोर्स फॉर्मेशन के थ्रू ही उनका रिप्रोडक्शन कंप्लीट होता है. ठीक है, तो होमोस्पोरस टेरिडोफाइट्स में क्या होता है? ओनली वन टाइप ऑफ स्पोर्स आर प्रेजेंट. एग्जांपल इज लाइकोपोडियम, टेरिडियम, इक्विसेटम एंड ड्राइप्टेरिस. दिस फोर एग्जांपल्स रिमेंबर इन केस ऑफ होमोस्पोरस टेरिडोफाइट्स. फाइन. एंड इफ सी एवरीवेयर देयर इज एन एक्सेप्शन. सो हियर इज आल्सो एन एक्सेप्शन, दैट इज हेटेरोस्पोरस, दैट इज two spores are present. One is microspores and the other is megaspores. Some plant species are there in case of pteridophytes. Those show the heterosporous type of they shows heterosporous, like micro and megaspores. Both types of spores are present. Fine. And this is the example: Selaginella, Isois, Marsilia, Salvinia, Azolla. These important examples I remember from NEET point of view, because they may ask the question like in case of heterosporous spores, direct question they won't ask, they'll just twist the question and ask. So just remember the points which I am discussing with you. Fine. This was about the more is there to explain about the life cycle of pteridophytes. So till now you remember this up to heterosporous pteridophytes. Fine. So now let's see the life cycle, how it continues in case of pteridophytes. So life cycle in case of pteridophytes, I have made it very easy for you about how the life cycle in case of pteridophytes takes place. See, it takes place in spores twice and diploid होता है. ठीक है, spores where it is formed, very easy, in sporangia. I have told you in previous classes about sporangia, right? सो स्पोर्स, उसके बाद क्या होगा? स्पोर कहाँ होगा? जर्मिनेशन कहाँ होगा? सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट बात ये है कि जर्मिनेशन कहाँ होगा? Germination, it doesn't take place inside the sporangia. It takes place outside, that is in soil. Example is कहाँ वो उसका जर्मिनेशन होगा? सॉइल में. एक्सोस्पोरिंग मतलब it takes place outside the sporangia, that is in soil. The germination will take place in case of the pteridophytes. Fine. See, after the germination, what happens is that prothallus is formed. How prothallus is formed? Germination of each spore, when it happens, it leads to gametophyte, and it's nothing but prothallus. Prothallus word terminology. After that, it forms gametangia, and this is nothing but prothallus to gametangia. Gametophytic generation में we have entered into gametophytic generation. Fine. So gametangia दो होते हैं, you know very well, male and female. Male is called antheridia and female is called archegonia. Na, so easy. And after that, both of them fuse and form zygote. Zygote means that is after fertilization it will form zygote. And what is the process by which it forms zygote? It's nothing but zooidogamy. Zooidogamy, it forms the zygote, it will form, and after zygote embryo will form, and that embryo will leads to sporophytic plant. That is, that plant will get differentiated into roots, stem cell, everything will get formed. Fine. So this is about the life cycle, and this is the important note I have given you. Sexual reproduction is in case of pteridophytes is oogamous. Why? Because see, I have shown you why it's oogamous. The process of life cycle, it continues like this. Fine. And life cycle is diplohaploid. See, first is diploid. डिप्लॉइड से हैप्लॉइड हो रहा है, उसको क्या कहेंगे? डिप्लोहैप्लॉन्टिक लाइफ साइकिल कहेंगे. और जो है क्या इसमें क्या है? स्पोरोफाइट एंड गैमेटोफाइट आर इंडिपेंडेंट ऑफ ईच अदर. दे आर नॉट डिपेंडेंट, दे आर इंडिपेंडेंट ऑफ ईच अदर. वेरी इजी ना, आई हैव मेड इट वेरी इजी सो डैट यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड ईच एंड एवरी टर्मिनोलॉजी. की बहुत सिंपल है, आपको बहुत ईजी तरीके से इस चार्ट में अगर आप पढ़ेंगे तो आप अपने कंसेप्ट बहुत अच्छी तरीके से क्लियर कर सकते हैं. आई वॉन्ट यू टू सी माई नोट्स वेरी नाइसली. इफ यू हैव एनी डाउट्स यू कैन email us or you can just contact me. I have given the contact number even, so you can contact me in either way, whatever be the mode of communication. So this is about the life cycle in case of pteridophytes. I am making this lecture as interesting as I can. So this is about life cycle, and now we'll see about the classes of pteridophytes. बहुत important है classes कि कितने classes में जो pteridophytes divide होते हैं. Fine. So we'll discuss about the classes in case of pteridophytes. After this, we'll discuss about the classes of pteridophytes. So classification, it's divided into 4 important classes. They are Psilopsida, Lycopsida, Sphenopsida, and Filicinae. These are the 4 classes from pteridophytes. See, first is Psilopsida. There is nothing more to know about Psilopsida. They are the very ancient vascular plants, and the most of the plants in case of Psilopsida they have extinct. Only one living fossil is there. One is that is Psilotum. They are very important from NEET point of view. Just remember Psilotum, very important. And the next is Rhynia and Horneophyton. In case of Rhynia and Horneophyton, they are fossil plants. These two also very important. Remember the terminology. In case of, they are present in class Psilopsida, and in case of sporangia, they are sporangia are formed on the stem in case of Psilopsida. So now this was about Psilopsida. We'll go to Lycopsida. Now see about Lycopsida, what happens in case of Lycopsida. So Lycopsida, Sphenopsida, Filicinae. We'll discuss each and every classes in details, and whatever possible way I can make you explain. Fine. So now let's discuss about the second class, that is Lycopsida. Lycopsida means club mosses are placed in case of Lycopsida. Club mosses, ठीक है. Sporangia, where they are formed on sporophylls. Fine. These are the very important example. I think Lepidodendron and Selagina, these two are very important. This rest I have given you just for your information. Lepidodendron is giant club moss. This is the fossil plant that is present in case of that Lycopsida classes. Fine. That is Lycopodium. It's common club moss, and that is the medicinal plant. Basically, it is used in homeopathic. In homeopathy medicine, that is tonic is used. Isoids, quillwort or marlin grass, Selaginella, spike moss or bird's nest. This name you should remember because it might come in the exam, which like plant is known as a bird's nest moss. That is Selaginella. Fine. Selaginella bryopteris, and this is known as the Sanjivani. Fine. This plant actually has no medicinal properties. This Selaginella bryopteris, it has no medicinal properties. Fine. So these were about the different examples in case of Lycopsida, because you have to know the different terminology that has been used in these Pteridophytes and the kingdom of in Pteridophytes in case of plant kingdom. So this is Lycopsida. The second class is about club mosses. Now we'll go to third class and then the
now let's
see about the third class in case of Pteridophytes. It's Sphenopsida. What is included here? Horse tails are basically included in case of Sphenopsida. See, the plant body is differentiated into roots, stems and leaves, and the formation of sporangia will takes place on sporangiospores. Example you remember is Equisetum, Sphenophyla and Hyaenia. Example is Equisetum, Sphenophyla and Hyaenia. Fine. So nothing more to remember in case of Sphenopsida. It's very small class. And the next is the last class, which I am going to discuss you about the classification of Pteridophytes. Last class I'll discuss in details about this. This is about what is this. Maximum things you have to know about Sphenopsida is this only. Nothing more than that is included in this class. So just remember the examples and what is included here. Horse tails are included. So this is the last class of this classification, Filicinae. This is the largest group of Pteridophytes. The question might come, which is the largest group of Pteridophytes in case of classification, that is Filicinae. And they are commonly called as fawns. That is, all the fawns are included in Filicinae. Basically, maximum of the Pteridophytes are fawns only. See, this is the example you have to remember from NEET point of view. Very important example. Pteridium, Pteridis and Dryopteris. These three are called as bracken fern or sun fern. Okay? See, Dryopteris is nothing but brook shield fern. This is the name that has been given to this kind of Pteridophytes. Adiantum is walking fern. Ophioglossum is adult tongue form. Marsilia is pepperwort fern, and Azolla is aquatic fern. And also important, Azolla, you have to remember, Azolla is the smallest Pteridophyte. Fine. So remember this few examples in case of Filicinae. And with this I have completed my Pteridophytes today.